Good morning, everyone. It's good to be together this morning. I'm the Reverend Doug Watkins. I'm your interim lead minister, and I am happy that you're here. We're happy whether you are here on site or if you are joining us in live stream this morning. We are united as a single community. This is a liberal religious community of spiritual seekers, and together we work to strengthen our core values of freedom, reason, respect, and love. And we welcome you in the fullness of your age and your race, ethnicity, gender expression, sexual orientation, and religious background. If you are visiting us for the first time, we extend a special welcome. We are so glad that you chose to be with us today. We hope that you find that the service is meaningful to you. We invite all of our folks who continue here to offer you an especially warm welcome, and we hope that you will join us again soon. If you are here in person, we invite you to fill out the guest card that you hopefully received as you came in so that we can stay in touch with you. If you didn't happen to get one, please ask for one before you leave the service today. If you're visiting us online, you can let us know you're here by emailing us at welcome@eliotchapel.org, and we would love to personally welcome you as well. A couple things to keep in mind. As we move through the autumn season and into the winter, we remind you that in addition to expecting that there may be yet another spike in the number of cases in COVID, and also that there are a couple of new variants that we're watching carefully, just to keep in mind that if you feel like this is a time you want to be extra careful, that wearing a mask is very effective, especially in N95. And we encourage you to consider wearing a mask when you're here in worship. It is one of the places that creates a slightly more risky situation. But either way, we're very glad you're here. Remember that today, what was Trunk or Treat has been moved, not surprisingly, given the weather, to Adams Hall. So we look forward to joining you all together for fun festivities after the service. And a reminder, it is that time of year next Sunday. If you get here at what you think of as 10 o'clock without changing your clock, you will probably be here at the wrong time. And so daylight savings time ends next Sunday. So please keep that in mind. As we move more deeply into our service, and Annalise sparks our chalice, Katie Gelfin offers these words. In this time of turning and changing seasons, there can be great mystery and longer nights. We need flame for warmth and illumination. We call forth the life of our faith by igniting our chalice. This spark of new beginning invites us into a sacred space to reflect where we have been and where we are going. Even knowing that this particular flame will intentionally end with our ritual extinguishing, we fear not its end. For we know, with brave hearts, just as the years cycle round and around, that from every ending of our lives, we are sent forth to make a new beginning. I invite us to honor that sense of turning and change as an essential part of our spiritual journey as we rise together and join in our opening hymn, hymn number 51, Lady of the Season's Laughter.
When
because as a congregation, we come together in a sense of covenant, agreeing how it is that we will be with each other. It is important for us to regularly remind ourselves what that is about. So I invite you to join me in reciting together, printed in your order of service, Eliot Chapel's Congregational Covenant. As together we say, as a free congregation, we promise to one another our mutual trust and support to create beloved community. We promise to be kinder to each other than we have to be, to listen fully to each other with an open mind and heart, to speak responsibly and respectfully, to find ways to improve our church for all members and friends.
Our time for all ages this morning is titled On Fear by Pema Chöldren. Once there was a young warrior. Her teacher told her that she had to do battle with fear. She didn't want to do that. It seemed too aggressive. It was scary. It seemed unfriendly. But the teacher said she had to do it and gave her instructions for the battle. The day arrived. The student warrior stood on one side and fear stood on the other. The warrior was feeling very small and fear was looking big and wrathful. They both had their weapons. The young warrior roused herself and went toward fear and asked, "May I have permission to go into battle with you?"
And fear said, "Well, thank you for showing me so much respect that you asked permission."
"How can I defeat you?" Fear asked.
Fear said, "Well, my weapons are that I talk fast, I get very close to your face, and then you get completely unnerved and you do whatever I say. If you don't do what I tell you, well, I have no power. You can listen to me, you can respect me, you can even be convinced by me. But if you don't do what I say, I have no power."
And in that way, the student warrior learned how to defeat fear.
I love Pema Chöldren's short and to-the-point story illustrating something that we'll explore in the service today. That fear is a part of all of our lives, probably every day, several times a day. There are things that make us anxious or fearful. The thing is that fear is not necessarily a bad thing. It reminds us sometimes to pay attention, to know that there may be things that we need to avoid or need to think carefully about. But always the most important thing is how we relate to fear and how we choose to listen to it, and most of all, what we do with it and what we allow it to do with us. So I look forward to exploring that more with everyone in the sermon today.
All right, and kids, religious education begins shortly. You may exit at the back.
This morning in our prayer time, I would like for us to spend a few moments in remembrance. This is a time of year when often many religious traditions take some moments to remember those who have passed, and we will do so together. Let me ask at the very end of our time of remembrance that we will do a reading together that is in the gray hymnal. So if you would turn to number 720, 720, we remember them, and keep that ready for the end of our time together. And I'll invite you to respond in the italicized portion of the text. So for just a moment, to place ourselves in that right, open, and deeply connected place, I invite you to find a comfortable and well-grounded way to sit in your seat, to feel your feet firmly planted on the earth and connected, that you feel that you're in a position that you can hold without being distracted, with some sense of being lifted up, but also comfortable. And for just a moment, if you're comfortable doing so, to close your eyes and to let your breath call you fully to this time in this place. Aware in your body where you feel it most this morning, as it enters through your nose, as it inflates in your chest, or as it moves deep within you into your belly. And from this place of connection and presence, may we together remember. I invite you, before I go through the list, to just for a moment call to mind those folks in your own life that you are remembering this morning. As we move towards the end of the time, I'll invite you, if you wish to speak their names as well. But to let that very personal remembrance bring you into the space of knowing how important it is that we remember. That the way that we hold each other, the way that the people we care about continue to live on in us, is one of the most meaningful things that we do in life. It allows whatever we believe about life and death for there to be a sort of legacy and immortality in how the people we love live in us. And so in that spirit of remembrance, as I share some of these names, in some way in your mind and heart, offer a blessing for the ways in which these mighty souls have changed the world, just as you are doing so every day. So we remember the people who have died, mostly in the last year. We begin with those in our congregation. Elmer McNulty, Patricia Lee, Charles Fogelman, DeWalt Fowler, Janie Fowler, Roger Esnault, Harry Salvin. We remember also some of the folks that you have sent in because they are in your minds and hearts. We remember Ashley O'Sullivan Huffstetler, Georgia Archibald, who died in 20 but was honored yesterday here, Lillian Sarah Latempio, Michael Joseph Carter, and just this week, Diane Ponchi. If there are people that you are holding in your heart this morning who have died in the last year or still remain deeply with you, I invite you in this shared space to speak their names now. We hold each of these names in our hearts, in our minds, in the very way that we live our life. They live on in us. This year, before we close this time of remembrance, we recall that throughout the last several years, the millions of people whose lives have been changed by COVID, and the almost 7 million deaths around the world, holding in our minds perhaps some of the people you know who have been lost, and the over 100,000 daily cases in the world. We hold the truth of the change that has come about in the losses because of COVID as well. Remaining in that prayerful, thoughtful mode, I invite you to turn to number 720 and join me in that responsive. Again, replying in the italicized portion. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now part of us as we remember them. Will you join me as we sing together to close this section, number 366, All My Memories of Love. 336. It is our tradition here in our offering to share half of the plate with a local organization that does important work. And this is our last opportunity this month to share with the Red Circle. We hope that you will be especially generous on this last Sunday to assist them in their important work serving St. Louis County, assisting in community building, connection with education, the importance of the uplift of the arts, and in general, working to better the lives and build community. It is important and essential work, and one that we are honored to partner in. May a spirit of deep connection and deep generosity inspire our giving as the offering is now given and received. Thank you, Adam. As our offering comes forward, as our greeters bring it forward, may we dedicate this offering by together reading our dedication of gifts printed in the order of service. To the work of the church, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives, and these are offerings. Thanks to all of you for your generosity. In preparation for reflecting a little bit together on fear in our lives, a reading taken from Pema Chodron once again. In this anxious time in the world, may we have the simple truth of moving through the places that scare us. When we are scared for our own lives, fear for those we love, fear for the world in which we live. When we are overwhelmed with the world and cannot see our way clear. When life seems a struggle between one moment tedium and apathy, or frenzy and exhaustion. When today sometimes seems a punishment and tomorrow a torment. May we find the courage of patience and truth. May we find the strength of friendship and love. The places that scare us make us see the world only through the perspective of cynicism and cruelty. May we recognize courage in ourselves and in our companions, not a courage that is dramatic or announced with great fanfare, one that commands little notice in the world. But may we have the state of mind to notice any overture of courage, but especially ones that might otherwise be taken for granted and lost. The places that scare us can make us believe that we are not enough, that we are powerless in the face of the world. May we see within ourselves possibility. Take example from those who live one day at a time, who see the long path of our days and do not despair, who inspire us by their patient courage when we are impatient and afraid. So may it be. Here ends the reading. Thank you, Adam, David, choir. Very appropriate lead-in for our thinking together about fear. One of the things that I wanted to try to do as we began to explore this theme is to root it a little more in its connection with nature in this season. The ancient ones knew that there were powerful truths about this time. And of course, it would depend on what part of the world, what those truths were, which hemisphere. But in most places, there is a time of deep change and transformation. And there was a certain way in which our forebears, and even we, experienced this time of moving into autumn. It was a time that brought the imagination alive as the weather began to change, and first the nights and then the days became cooler and shorter. And there was a sort of mistiness and more rain, and sometimes in certain places, even the beginning of a few snowflakes. And in that change, there was another deep awareness. Something about moving into that time of greater night often made our forebears, and sometimes we too, aware of what often seems a little more separate. The sense of the past and present, the living and the dead, may seem a little more open, a little more permeable in this time. And so often in this season, we turn our attention to acknowledging the past in a variety of ways, but certainly the spirit of those from our past. Samhain, All Saints, All Hallows Eve, all of them in some way acknowledge the possibility that that which we think of is often very separate, the living and the dead, the past and the present and the future, perhaps are not quite so separate. And the thing is that often, as we talked about in a variety of ways, when we come to know the world in a new way, when we come to try to honestly explore our past, our relationships with others and with ourselves, that we sometimes come into contact with things that create in us anxiety, that remind us of hard things that sometimes we just as soon forget. And there are ways in which the past can haunt us. Sometimes that haunting has a bittersweet quality, and sometimes it just brings us to places that scare us. And so it is appropriate in this time for us to explore a little bit about that deep connection between the past and the present, the things that haunt us, and the way that fear, anxiety, angst about our lives, while often present, is also a place of profound potential change as well. Now, there are several reasons why this is a sermon that I find myself, at least in my own mind, preaching to myself over and over again. One is that, truth be told, when I think about the things that I struggle with most often, one of the most powerful forces in my life of struggle is that of fear. And so over time, it has been so helpful for me to explore that more. But I think there's something even deeper and larger that inspires me to want to speak to it today, and one way or another return to it quite often. And the source of really helping me think about this more deeply is not one that I would have expected. It comes from the first time I remember sitting in the theater in 1991 and seeing the Albert Brooks film, Defending Your Life, which co-starred Meryl Streep. And in this story, in this film, it explores the post-mortem experience of a yuppie everyman, played by Albert Brooks, who dies while he's trying to search for his CDs or his cell phone or something in his convertible and has a car wreck, and goes to the afterlife and finds out that everyone in the afterlife goes through this trial that looks very much like a typical courtroom on the earth. But the thing that you are tried for in your life is how you dealt with and handled your fear. And as I sat there, whether that's true or not, I thought, isn't it very, very telling in most of our lives that the way in which we deal with our fear, if it isn't the most important thing in our lives, is certainly the place that over and over again will teach us deep and sometimes difficult things about ourselves. What if it is at least the case that one of the most significant things that we are put here to do is to learn how to deal and be more human with our fear, and to let that journey in and of itself teach us more about our lives, about the life that we share with each other, that it might actually be a place, this fear, that doesn't so much hold us apart, but actually deeply unites us with each other. And so I found myself thinking with a much more open-minded and open-hearted journey through my own experience and what I've seen again and again in other people's experience with their fear. Now, the thing is, it does begin with the idea that fear in and of itself is not a bad thing. As Hannah Arendt reminds us, fear is an emotion indispensable to our survival. Fear really comes from the place, ideally, of reminding us to pay attention, to be extra aware, to be on guard, to have our senses and our bodies most ready for what life may bring our way. The problem is, of course, that over time, often we lose that edgy goodness to it, and it becomes something that is destructive to us. We fall out of right relationship with our fear. And so part of what we seek to do when we are trying to be in better relationship with fear is to return to that greater sense of its purpose and how it functions in our life, and to understand it more deeply. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote, "The underlying fundamental uncertainty, which scientific tests have now proven, is that it is more frightening for us than physical pain is. The very basis of our greatest fear is doubting ourselves, not trusting ourselves, and in the midst of great mystery in our lives, letting that sense of doubt in our own worthiness or strength or goodness be even further eroded." The way in which fear most often does the most damage is that it undermines our deeper sense of who we are. It undermines what we think is possible in our sense of our own power. It removes us from a truer relationship with ourselves and certainly with each other. So the thing that I want to encourage today is that when you think about the things that scare you, to work on what in both mindfulness and Buddhism is called the idea of befriending your fear. It doesn't necessarily mean, as is true of some of our friends, that everything about them is wonderful. But it means that we engage what we are afraid of with a little more of an open mind and heart. And I found myself not too long ago doing that work myself and I realized how life-changing it can be. Now, as far as I know, I've not shared this story with you, but if I have, just pretend like you've never heard it before, because it really applies very well. Not very long ago, in the midst of serving a congregation and doing some of the most important work I've ever done, I became quite certain that I was totally screwing it up. Disastrously, actually, and it seemed like everyone was aware of just how badly I was doing. And as life would have it, at the very same time, I had fallen in love, and it just happened about that same week that I realized that that was totally going into the toilet as well. And so in a single week, I realized that two things that were most important to me in life, my work and my love life, were both an utter disaster. And what was funny is I found myself deeply afraid. And when I thought about it, when I sat with it in my meditation, underneath that fear was a belief that perhaps I had failed. That in two of the most important things in my life, helping others and connecting in love, I had been an utter failure. That's what I was afraid of. And that everyone, certainly the people who were closest to me, would know it. And so I sat with that, because whether I failed or not, that was what I was afraid of. And I realized, as I really sat with both of those things, that in both of them, in my ministry, no one had promised me that this ministry was going to be an easy one. And it wasn't. And some difficult things happened. But the thing is, I approached it with an open mind and heart, and I was doing the best I could. And in terms of love, certainly it was not working out in the way that I wished. But isn't that how often love is? That all you can do is make your way into it and see what you discover about yourself and the other person. And the more that I sat with it, the more I thought, well, let's just say that you are a failure. Isn't it okay to fail trying to do things that matter deeply? Don't we all do that time and time again in our lives? And isn't that better than never risking in our lives at all? And in sitting with that relationship, with the truth about the possibility of failure, I found a place in myself that helped me move on and learn from those two things. To know at the end of my ministry, while a lot of difficult things happened, that congregation went on to make some of the right choices to make themselves better. And at least I didn't mess it up so much that they couldn't do that. And in that love relationship, what eventually happened is we found the right way to be in relationship with each other. Sometimes fear brings us to places that have powerful truths to tell us. And often those truths start in difficult places in and of themselves. I think about Elizabeth Gilbert, who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and she talks about in the midst of a very bad time in her life, she went to Rome and saw the Augustinium, the old ruins that were meant to be the place where the emperor would be buried. And it was a lonely and sad and horrible place. But she realized that at its heart, a ruined place is a place that has been so broken down, so changed, so removed from what maybe it originally intended, that so much more is possible. And that is true in our lives. Often the places that feel ruined that feel so broken are also the places that help us move into the newest and most brave spaces in our lives. She concluded as she looked at that old rubble of a place that in her own life, it was a gift to be in the midst of ruin. It was a place of knowing what was possible in a unique way. So your fear may be leading you to that new possibility if you will sit with it and befriend it long enough. And when you can't, the final thing I remind you is that one of the gifts of having friends and family or coming here in community is when you can't find it, sometimes by just sitting with, being with, having patience with people around you, they can help you discover what you need to know about your life. There are a variety of ways that we help each other again and again, and that is also a gift in dealing with our fear. As we think about the gift that we give to each other, I find myself thinking about the end of a poem by Teresa Soto. She says this: there are a lot of ways to stay alive, but what she doesn't recommend is that you do it alone. She says you can always fight your way towards freedom, but I recommend that you decline the option of struggling by yourself. The point is, she says, to get your life. And there was this wise ruler who once said that by ourselves, each of us are unprotected. But two people together can face the worst, the failure, the heartbreak, the upending worlds we hold in our hearts, the secret shame that we will shed like the skin of a smooth snake, though it will sometimes take time. And with three people, you being one of them, you may find that eventually all will be well. As we move into our theme next month, change, your fear may be best preparing you. It may be showing you the open places that you can move into to make the changes you need. And regardless, you're on this journey together, here, in your life. Hold on to that. Let its power teach you about who you really are. Let it help you come home again and do what is needed. So may it be for each of us in this time. Amen. And blessed be. Will you rise in the ways that we do and join me in number 1012, When I Am Frightened.
When I am certain
We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth that lives on in each of us, not the abiding love that we share with each other, not the fire of living our lives as we must live them. These will remain in how you live your life until you gather with us again. I invite you to take a seat and receive one more gift before we move on into our day. Yes. As we move on into our coffee hour, I hope that you will join us. Remember that it's also trunk or treat. And take a moment as you head to coffee hour to find someone around you that you haven't had a chance to say hello to and introduce yourself. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to joining you next week for a new month together, a new theme. May the rest of your day and this Halloween weekend be blessed. Thanks for joining us. See you in coffee hour.